Ever wonder what makes the greats great? What makes the successful successful? What makes the brilliant brilliant? Our Tuesday meetups with the celebrities of pharma industry and science are your one-stop shop to all these answers and more. Join us for Pies of Life, an initiative of the Biopatrika Industry Mentorship Program, where we bring your dream mentors to you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the mentorship session by Biopatrika.
Thank you, Vikram. Firstly, wishing you all a very pleasant time of the day from Team Biopatrika. It's actually a matter of great pleasure to me in welcoming all the SciComm enthusiasts to this exclusive session on demystifying industry-led scientific communications, the why, what, and how with Avishek Pal. Having started off as a publication writer with GSK Vaccines nearly 13 years ago, our speaker for the day is currently a certified medical publication professional and the scientific communications director for the cell and gene therapy divisions of Novartis' CAR-T program. Abhishek is also passionate about scientific communications, data transparency initiatives, and publication ethics, to name a few. Translating his passion into action, he has conducted various training sessions and workshops with collaboration with ISCR and ISMPP in India, in addition to designing the clinical research curriculums for various educational institutes. Today, we welcome Abhishek to communicate his take on industry-led scientific communications, the very field which he has been an integral part of for all these years. Over to you, Abhishek.
Oh my God, Parvati, you need to send me this because I'm going to share this bio with whoever asks me next time. It sounds so great, no, but thank you. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the invitation. And I know I've been following Biopatrika for a while, and then Virender, when he got in touch very kindly and asked if I would like to speak, I think it was a great opportunity. So very honored to speak with you, all of you. So I know how the format works. So let me talk a little bit about my journey. And during that time, what I'll do is I'll try and call out instances and not naming people, but folks who have kind of helped me come this far. It's very important. So maybe to give kind of explain a little bit where my role fits in the whole, industry setup. So, the drug development process, as you know, it takes a long time, but there are so many different teams involved. But to summarize, you have an early development, and I'm keeping aside the other folks, all of who contribute. Simply put, we have, say, an early development team, which essentially runs the preclinical and then early phase trials. And then they eventually transition to the development team, who actually run the pivotal trials, which then leading to a submission to a regulatory authority. And then, of course, we have the global medical affairs team, whose job is to then liaise with the development team and then also act as a gatekeeper of all these data and then prep for launch. And by that, I mean essentially preparing, working with the value and access team to negotiate the pricing, access in different countries, working with the commercial teams to have their sales reps ready, working with the field medical team to make sure that the physicians have the knowledge and information that they need to make informed decisions. And my role sits within medical affairs, global medical affairs. And my job is specifically scientific communications related to the CAR-T program, essentially publications, Congress presentations, satellite symposium, ad boards, medical events. So essentially, my role is to oversee what are those different data points that need to be shared with certain audiences, what is the right time, what is the right channel, and then to coordinate that, and then, of course, execute it with different teams, right? So I started off 15 years ago. And, I'm from Calcutta originally. And then when I was in school, the regular usual style, until 10th, you're kind of very, engaged. You want to do many things in life. I always wanted to be a medical doctor. By the time I think I completed my 10th, I lost steam, but I was still very, very interested. I wanted to. So I did take all those, all India entrance exams that 1 year. I think I traveled all over India. In fact, I was telling myself, I should tell you, when I was at Aligarh taking their entrance, and I got ragged even without getting an admission. Even when I took the entrance, they thought this is a good guy to kind of rag outside the university gate. But what I realized is, of course, I wasn't prepared. So I took a year off. So I did not take admission to any college. Huge risk, and somehow I think my parents were okay with it. In India, I don't think they have the concept of a break, but I think they said, okay, since you're so interested, let's give it a shot. I prepared really hard. And then it so happened, I think 2 months before the second entrance, my dad got diagnosed with oral cancer. And then, as you can imagine, I did try and focus, but things got a little out of control. But not because of that, but I think I realized I needed to do something faster and complete my education quicker to kind of make things work. But all said and done, I didn't make it. That's the summary. So it didn't work out. And at that point, I had to make a decision whether, like a lot of my friends who actually took more attempts to try and get into the entrance, and general category has like hardly any seats there. I decided that it's time, and my father was very, very supportive. He said, move out of the house, try and live independently. So I moved to Bangalore. And I think at that point, I think I probably grew up much quicker in that whole experience of managing his disease, as the elder son, and then moving to Bangalore, trying to figure out what I want to do. So I started off in microbiology. And it so happens that they start you off in microbiology on all the different aspects. It felt like medical microbiology is like a fascinating thing. I would love to do it. And then by the time I got to the third year, I realized it's a lot of memorization. It's a lot of rote learning, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. And so obviously I had to change my plan. So I was thinking, I would go to Manipal and do a medical microbiology, or I would go to VIT to do it. And I had filled in the forms. I got like the offers, but then I realized that no, that's not something that I want to do. And the very interesting thing is, one of my friends, classmates, whose brother was a forest warden, he was going for an entrance in Bangalore at NCBS for a wildlife conservation program that they had just launched. And he said, hey, I just don't have anybody to come with me. Why don't you come? So I just went with him in the walk-in. And then somehow, it was a very generic kind of question and answer thing. And they made an offer to me. And I was like, okay, you know what? This is the first entrance in my life that I've cracked. So I'm going to take it. And then, my parents were like, my father was, okay, it's up to you. But is this what you want to do in the long run? Say 90% of time in the rural areas, in the jungles, and 10% in the cities. Is this what you are planning to do with your life? So again, we need, that's probably another step that I took. So I need to be more practical. So I said, okay, it doesn't make sense. So I'm not going to kind of do it. But what else? So I started applying for, other entrances or, all over India. So JNU and JNCSR and all of those things. Even Tata Memorial Hospital, they have like a MSc by research. And I applied for that. But by the time I could get, the confirmations that, I couldn't take a risk, and I had to make a decision that, I need a confirmed seat somewhere. So Bangalore University, because I studied there, they had a merit list. So they said, okay, you can choose a seat. And I chose it. I paid this fee. And then I got the letter from Tata Memorial saying, why don't you come and join us in 3 months? So which was devastating, because I really wanted to do something in oncology for the personal reasons. But I said, you know what, no problem. I'm going to finish it quickly. And maybe someday I'll get to work in oncology. So I finished my master's from there. It was tough. I think, the kind of guidance I received, I don't think anybody was very research oriented. Probably I would have thought a little bit differently then. But my goal at that point was, let's finish masters and, let's see, if I can get something like a job. And I didn't have the luxury essentially to think that, okay, maybe I can do some research, and I just needed to get back to work. And again, the idea was, let's try out. I made a list of all these different pharma organizations, which I thought could be a good option for me after my master's in microbiology. And it so happened they are organized like a campusing. And you all these manufacturing companies started coming in, and they made some huge presentations. Everybody was super excited that we got campusing in our college. And then when it came to salary discussions, I mean, it was peanuts, and I was like, I was already on a student loan. And I just said, if they don't pay me more than 10,000, I just cannot survive in Bangalore. So I can't take a job. I will not take a job which is less than 10,000. And I let go of a few other companies. I think medical coding was coming up a lot those days. ITC, they had an R&D unit there, but it was all very, very low. And I said, I'm not going to take it. So it was a bit of a gamble. But I think what I kind of learned is it's very important to know your self-worth. And I think if you know about it, if you are confident, I think eventually it works out. You need a bit of patience. So I always enjoyed immunology a lot. So when GSK Vaccines asked me to kind of come and sit for their walk-in, I was quite excited. And it's very interesting because at that point I just didn't know what the role is about. I knew that it's not data management, and I knew that it's not statistics. I didn't know anything else. I enjoyed kind of the whole entrance. So they had written tests, they had multiple rounds. And I realized much later why they were scrutinizing me so much is because they had an all-women's team. And I was the first guy they were kind of thinking of hiring. So they were so cautious that they grilled me like crazy. And, after every round, apparently they had a debrief whether it's worth getting me in. Some people thought I speak too much. Some people thought I will not agree to a female boss, those kind of things. And then they discuss. And I'm very grateful that at that point, my hiring manager decided to take a chance with me. So I got in. And I think thereon it was fantastic because, I started off with epidemiological studies. I learned publication writing there. She and the rest of the team, they taught me. And I was part of the starting cohort for the publication writing team at GSK worldwide. They had never had an internal publication writing team before. They always had regulatory writers. And then in India also, I think that was the time when they slowly started thinking of this as an option. So that's how it started. And then I, moved on to their influenza program. And now we always think of COVID as the pandemic influenza, but at that point it was H5N1, it was H1N1. I did the seasonal influenza vaccine, program support for quite some time. Their quadrivalent vaccines. So fantastic learnings. Working with the global teams for the first time, kind of getting used to a different culture altogether, because it was kind of hands-off. If you would have to ask the right questions. If you ask for too many guidance, too much of guidance, or they would always wonder, is it like a cultural thing or is it like an individual thing? So there were a lot of stereotypes that to kind of break. But I think it was a great almost 6 years of learning there at GSK, and they were the ones who first said, why don't you go outside and share a bit of your experience, or maybe you learn something. So that's when I slowly started presenting externally, ICR meetings, BMJ meetings, learned so much from others who were so much more experienced than I was, who were freelancing at that time. And that's how I started getting involved outside, the organization. And it's funny because I said I didn't have the luxury to do research, but then I always wanted to, and still want to do research. And what I ended up doing is I cleared the National Law School entrance exam. So, for those of you who are from Bangalore, it's a fantastic institute, of course, the best in India for legal studies. But they started an interdisciplinary research program. And I went in first time when I submitted, obviously they just didn't even consider the proposal. But the second time, I took time off from office. and actually prepare a proposal. Every Saturday, I remember I used to go and meet somebody or the other at all research institutes in Bangalore to ask for input on my project and my proposal. Few of them really made time. Dr. Prashant from Public Health Foundation and few others, and I think it was fantastic. So second time I made it, GSK was really gracious to allow me to do the research methodology classes. So I would get, it was the other side of Bangalore, and I was coming from the other side. So I would leave home at 6, do my classes at the university, and then come back in the afternoon to do my work. At the university, it was such a revelation. I mean, you had these stalwarts, presenting, asking questions, and they would ask a question, and they would say, "Do you have an example?" And I would give them a science example, but they would not understand it. They would give you, and when they would give a social sciences example, for us it's very exact. For them, it's it varies. When they give you, if they talk about patents, if they talk about jurisprudence, they would talk about case laws. Fascinating. But 3 years down the line, I realized I was just not making any progress because they wanted it to be a legal research, whereas I was trying to do interdisciplinary. So I said, okay, probably it's not going to be the best approach for me. And in the meantime, I was at a conference presenting, and then I met a couple of folks from Novartis. And they said, hey, we are starting we have kind of stayed in touch from the very beginning. In fact, they got in touch a week after I had joined GSK. So we kind of stayed in touch. It's very important in the pharma industry, or even otherwise, to kind of stay connected. So never close a door completely is what I have learned. So they kind of approached me. They said, we're opening an oncology team. Would you be interested? And when they said oncology, and I said, I have to be there. I always thought I would retire from GSK. Such was the organization. But then I said, I need to grow. And I did not know anything about oncology. But I took the leap, changed cities. My wife was extremely upset with me because she had to move from her GSK job as well. But thankfully, she found something at Novartis as well. So we moved cities. And it was a brand new team again. And I thought, well, GSK is vaccines is based out of Belgium. Novartis in Switzerland, we can manage. But then it turns out that the Novartis oncology team was completely in the US. So it can completely put a spin on the time zones and the culture, etc. But it was fantastic. So I worked primarily on breast cancer. I did the mTOR inhibitors, the PI3K inhibitors, and it was fascinating. I mean, for me to really see how everything comes together in oncology. So I always feel like we need to take chances. I mean, if you stick to a comfort zone, it's very difficult to grow. And then or it's a choice. Then you can't complain. If you decide to be comfortable, happy with what you're doing, that's also fine. But if you want to grow, and if you think you want to take, you want to really see and explore new things, learn new things, it's probably worth taking a chance. So, and when I moved to Novartis, it kind of opened up even more in terms of what I could do externally. So our local medical affairs team started inviting some of us to do these workshops, for planning workshops, publication writing workshops for their physicians. So I did a lot of those at these different oncology institutes, cardio institutes, and it was kind of hands-on workshops, how to write abstracts, how to write papers. And then of course, some of them were real experts. They would again give feedback to say, okay, maybe we do it this way. Why is it not the right way? Publication ethics, we were able to share a lot of that. And that's how slowly I felt, although, I'm going to be in India, I think it's worth kind of exploring what's also there globally. So that's when I started also being part of, these Metcom specific organizations like ISMAP and MAPS. So International Society of Medical Publication Professionals, medical affairs groups, and then slowly participating in their workshops, participating in their work streams. And then, you slowly kind of get used to it. Then that's when I think I got my certification so much later. And it was more like a self-validation because I thought, what's my level of awareness or expertise versus the global, organizations and audiences. So that's when I took it. Thankfully, I made it. And essentially, I think that paved my way also that makes you eligible to kind of go into more work streams in, like, patient engagement, competitor tracking, authorship, I'm sure is a big topic for all of you. How do you define authorship? Is there a way to quantify open access? All of these I was able to, I'm able to work more and more closely. So I think that's brilliant. But change happens in organizations all the time. You think you're very happy, slowly. So I was a writer. I moved the levels. I started off managing a team, and then I realized I was kind of stagnating because I wasn't learning much. And then my boss at that point said, "Have you thought of doing something else?" And then I started thinking about publication management. Although I had the certification, I was not moving much. And he kind of nudged me. He said, do something with it. So I applied for a brand new role, which wasn't existing in India at that point, in a different therapy area, respiratory. So I was in oncology. This was in respiratory and pharma. I didn't know anybody. And I just applied, and somehow I made it. So, then they said, oh, you have to be in the Dublin office for 6 months. Again, a big change. My family was in India, a young kid, but I moved, I worked with that cultural aspect of it, tried to build, more relationships with the Basel office because a lot of our medical affairs folks are there. And it really gave a different perspective. When you visit a place, you come back, it's different. When you live in a place, it's very different. I think that really helped shape a lot. It really built my confidence that I could survive and I could thrive in a different setup. And it was a big change going from a people manager to an individual contributor. It's a risk not many people want to take. You're very comfortable working with the team, but then again, that's again something that I thought is important for me. So I did. And then 1.5 years later, again, another reorg. So they said, hey, what do you want to do now? And I said, okay, what do you got? So they said, okay, now we have a role in the medical affairs side. And all these experiences, they saw those experiences, which I thought probably nobody cared about, but those worked out, having really worked with actual budget, with actual agencies. And I then moved to the pharma, publications excellence team. So I was leading, publication ethics, innovation, strategy, and tactics for across all these different indications on pharma. And that's when, I started off in India. I didn't want to move countries. I just wanted to stay there. But I think midway through, I realized that there's too much travel involved. And a lot of folks were there in Basel, so it made sense. So I moved there in 2019, in October. Super happy. My manager, she was amazing. She kind of introduced me to all her contacts here. I was able to kind of get a lot of work done. Essentially, the plain language summaries, the patient engagement. How do we kind of take our scientific communication to the next level? Another thing which you might find very interesting is impact factors. What is the true value of your publication? Do you want to stick? So I kind of worked with another agency too, and I'll maybe share the link with Virender and you can share it with the group. Is there a better way to measure the impact of your publications? So all those work happened 1.5 years. And then at one point, my boss said, okay, I'm going to leave. And I said, okay, if you're leaving, then I should move as well. And at that point, one of my contacts on the oncology side say, hey, we got a lot of opportunities here. Do you want to move back in oncology? And I said, which ones? And they said, okay, we got hematology and then we got cell and gene. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fascinating. I've never worked in cell and hematology, and I've never worked in cell and gene, obviously. I just don't know what it is. So maybe that's the one. Thankfully, they thought the same, that I could probably do the job. So I moved to that role in 2020, July. And I've been into that role ever since, to kind of understanding what it's an epitome of personalized medicine, kind of identifying each patient. You are essentially extracting T cells, genetically modifying them for that patient, putting, expansion, putting them back, and then you watch it. And it's so complex, both the lymphoma and the, pediatric leukemia. The patient's disease state at that point when you are extracting the T cells, it takes time to genetically modify. The disease progresses, so you're giving some kind of bridging therapy, but still it moves. By the time your cells are ready and expanded, you put them back. Again, whether that's something that's their how the immune system is able to take it. And then the outcome is dependent on every bit of this. Their baseline characteristics will define the quality of your T cells, how exhausted they are, or are you preserving the stemness? And then you put them back in, do they have enough expansion capability? So I think that all fascinates me. And I think that's what has kind of kept me hooked to my current role. And that's what has been my journey. And I've kind of, like I said, I'm very committed to the medcoms community. I mean, every time I talk, even if one person says I'm interested and I'm going to make an effort to join the psychoms team, that is a win for me. I enjoy particularly converting regulatory writers into scientific publication writers. That's like a personal win for me. And that's how I've been. And we have a small organization called Mirror, which few of us like-minded folks do some basic work in engaging with universities and different students, communities to teach, kind of share with them about experiences. So I'll stop here.
Yeah. That was really interesting, and I'm sure our listeners will have lots and lots of questions about what you mentioned about the impact factor and other things. So I know for sure that Parvati has a question. So Parvati, do you want to ask?
Thank you. So, firstly, Abhishek, it was such a nice and inspiring thing to listen to your story. As Vikram said, we all have a lot of questions. So, basically, I just would like to say that your passion and the curiosity that you have in the field of oncology has come together after years of diverse range of experiences, actually. And as undergrad students, I guess we all have all fears about the experience and we'll not be able to switch fields and things like that. How do you say that? Like, what would you say to the students who are kind of afraid of, translatability and switching fields and being open to all the opportunities that they get?
I think there are some misconceptions around what you need to be in these kind of roles, and I think I did like a interview with the India Biosciences group because I wanted to share with them that it's not as scary as it looks. From academia, everybody thinks that's the dark side. It's going to be something not so great, but I think it's a matter of certain traits. And I think research teaches you that, our Indian education system does teach you that. Although a lot of people have a lot of things to say, but I believe, they create a lot of the awareness that we have, in terms of all the general knowledge, the hardiness, the flexibility that we have, and I think the lack of fear. I think all of these are very important if you're making life decisions like moving countries, moving states, changing fields. And I think the first bit, and also I think nowadays there's so much of social media activity, there's so many channels for you to reach out and ask people questions, ask people for help, for introductions. A lot of people do that. So it's a matter of kind of reaching out and asking questions. It's a matter of kind of identifying what works for you. Sometimes some profiles might look interesting from outside, but maybe they are not. But it's good always to speak to somebody who's in that role. I believe that you can change. I mean, I have seen folks who change careers completely. My boss, I mentioned about her. Her husband used to be an ICU nurse before he had joined Novartis in patient engagement. When he went back with my boss last year to the UK, he retrained as an ICU nurse and he went back there. So I mean, you can do stuff. I believe that if you're able to be flexible, if you're able to kind of you want to learn new things, I think then it's not a problem. A little bit of patience, of course. You don't expect everything to click one after the other. A lot of people, industry interviews, for example, if you start something, it could take a few months. Don't expect in a week you have an offer letter. So I think these things for you to consider.
So that was like fascinating journey. Like I never knew like one could go through like so many challenges and finally reach what you actually wanted to do at the beginning. So yeah, so I just want to know, like you mentioned about networking, which is anyway like we know like it's very important, but what about like mentors? Like do you have like mentors all through your journey, or like how mentorship played role in your career.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a great point, and you can realize I speak so much I forget the key points. So you're right, mentorship is key. I mentioned about my first manager, right? And she has been amazing. I picked up so many traits from her: patience, respect towards feedback from other folks. Two things I'll quickly mention. One was, I was writing my first abstract. A comment came in from somebody in Belgium. I didn't know who that person was. It was about rotavirus disease burden. And I did a lit search in PubMed. Read the first 2 or 3 papers, and I said, okay, this is my conclusion, that it's going down. And she said, are you sure? Because I think it's going up. So I went to my boss and I said, it's going down. I'm sure. I've done my lit search. So she called up that person and we had a call, and she said, Avishek has done a lit search. It's going up. She said, I'm not sure, but if you have done it, you have done it. And then later I realized she's the head of epidemiology of Novartis, GSK vaccines. Right. And then I went back and read the remaining 2 papers from the PubMed search, and I realized it's going down. So I ran back to my boss and I said, I made a mistake. She didn't scold me. She said, next time you make sure you create, make sure you do, before you say anything, you verify it so much so that when next time onwards you say something, people just trust that it's correct because it's coming from you. And I think I've remembered that all the time. It's amazing. I think there have been, and the next one, of course, my boss when I was in oncology, it changed quite a bit, but he really kind of let me flourish. Within a couple of weeks of joining, he allowed me to present to the CEO at that point of Novartis. He didn't know much about me. I didn't know the organization well enough. He just thought I could do it. And I pulled the team together. We did that. My next boss, he said, everything's great, Avishek, but you have a huge hesitation towards conflict. You always, you escape. Given a chance, you will not get into it at all. And I said, what's the big deal? Because I am a gentle person. I mean, if I can get work done. He said, eventually you will get stuck. And I did get stuck at some point on a call. And then I said, okay, that's a blind spot. And I consciously now, I still don't like it, but I work on my hesitation. So I need to prepare before I get into that call. So I think these things help. My latest boss, who I worked with, here in Basel, she kind of opened up so much her network towards me. She kind of shared her wisdom. I think these are important. So mentors, and it could be multiple mentors. Sometimes I've kind of reached out to people randomly and I've said, this is one thing I could, we have a learning and development team, and there was this gentleman who was really nice. And I said, can you give me some hints on how I could do it? So he simply introduced, they make introductions, and then you kind of figure your way out. And I think it's very important because sometimes you just don't know who to speak to. So very important. Thanks. Great question.
Yeah. Charu, please go ahead.
Yeah, Avishek, thank you for the amazing talk. It was really inspiring. I wanted to ask you about transferable skills. So what were the two transferable skills each from something that you are innately, that is the kind of person you are, and 2 things that you learned over your journey that you can now use as part of your job in medical affairs communication?
Okay, great one, good one. So I think for me, the one thing that is very inherent to me, which it's very innate, is my ability to work with people. So I somehow can connect and make things work. Bringing people together if there's a common project, common objective. It's a natural approach for me. Interestingly, I'm not an extrovert by nature. If you see me outside work, I prefer to be very quiet. But the moment you let me be in the medcom space, somehow I get charged. So I think that's one. I think the ability to bring people together. And I think the second piece is, patience. I'll be super, my threshold is very, very high. But even when someone crosses that, I'm able to control my expressions, my how I kind of carry myself. So they would, it's never going to be me screaming at anybody, however wrong they may have done. So I think it helps because it kind of makes the person comfortable that no matter however I mess up, it's okay to make mistakes and we'll be able to do things. I think these are things that are quite natural for me. But when it comes to skills, I think the one thing, like I mentioned, right, navigating conflict, that I have to really consciously prepare, then get into the meeting. But then when I'm in the meeting, I use my people skills to kind of mediate or kind of negotiate. So I think it's a mix of that. And the other aspect is, I think, saying no. I need to prepare a lot. And then, but I know that these are things that I'm not very good at. So I consciously try and kind of think through different scenarios in my mind, what could happen. And then I prepare myself for all of those. So I set calculated risk during my career, right? So it's not like I blindly said, oh, that looks great, let me just jump right in. So I thought through different pros and cons. I discussed with certain people, how is it moving, relocating countries? How is it in oncology? How is it in pharma? And then you say, the final decision is yours. But I think that these are the few things, I think.
It was a very interesting story of you, and I am really excited to ask one little question of the CAR-T, and I was pretty excited to connect with some of the folks in the industry, how the allogenic off-the-shelf therapy is going on in the industry, and there are so many challenges into it, and like a supply chain and the ability to scale up and all. How do you see where the industry is moving to that direction?
No, thank you. Thanks for the question. So I think for allogenic CAR-T, I mean, if you see the space, it's a few big pharma, but a lot of biotechs, a lot of smaller companies which have come up. And I think allogenic CAR-T is primarily coming from a lot of the mid-level and the biotechs. I have seen so far at, say, ASH or EHA, some preliminary data. But like you said, there are not just challenges in terms of supply chain, but also in terms of, it's a compromise. The specificity, what is the level to which you're willing to compromise for something that's quicker, cheaper? And I think that's what is going to change the game. Eventually, if the efficacy is proven to be somewhat comparable to the personalized CAR-Ts, I think that's where the game changes. But I think it's the field is not there yet. The way when I'm looking at it, the competitive landscape for allogenic CAR-T, I think it's going to take some time. You have seen some of the biotechs who are targeting solid tumors, for example, with allogenic CAR-T. I mean, some of them are actually ex-Novartis, and they, eventually the trials did not read out well, or in some cases there were safety issues. It's a little bit hard to generalize something like this, but it's a possibility, definitely. And I think it's going to be good for the field if they're able to reduce costs, if they're going to be more accessible to more people who need it and maybe who cannot afford it. I think absolutely, but not there yet, the field, I would say.
Yeah.
Before I go to Raji, I have a question. I'll take one question from the chat box. It's from Vibhuti. So she's asking, how much experience and preparation goes into getting in CMPP?
CMPP it's more experience based. So if you're quite certain that you want to be in the psychom space, and CMPP, by the way, is something more, I would say, industry agency side of things. So if you want to work in this space, then yes. And I would say it's good to have some years of experience and then you take the exam. Because otherwise you're not going to be able to implement what you learn during your preparation. You're simply going to mug it up. You're probably going to remember some stuff. You're going to probably clear it. But it gets very difficult because what you're doing is you're not applying it. You don't have a chance, or your role does not support yet to implement, I think, some components of publication ethics or publication planning, publication strategy, medical education tactics. So it's a little hard to I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying I think time it well so that it's somewhere between when you've had a reasonable experience and then you want to grow further in the medcom space. So then you take the certification, and that probably kind of helps you a little bit more to move to the next level. So you move from, say, hands-on delivery to something more tactical and to more strategic. And CMPP, for those of you who are wondering, it's the certification program which the ISMAP organization offers for those who are interested in working in the SciComm space.
Yeah, Avishek, this is Rashri. I have 3 quick questions for you. So first question is actually, can you give recruiters perspective while hiring the candidate for this kind of scientific communication kind of a role? Second question is, can you give some insights about the hierarchy of different roles in this particular field? Like how, from where you start and what all different roles you can take up in this journey? And third question is, how do you manage to prepare for your current role? I mean, so since you are working into this writing kind of a field, so initially, do you get any kind of draft of these results, and how do you prepare while writing, and what kind of interactions generally you have with actual researchers? So, I mean, in detail, can you describe like how this kind of work actually happens? Because we have no idea in this. And also, one last quick question is, can someone who has done PhD or someone who is already there in the industry for a long time can switch to this kind of job role? And again, you can give some recruiters perspective also. Sorry for long list of questions.
You might have to repeat some of your later questions.
I'll repeat. No problem.
The first few. So, when I think different organizations, maybe I think the best way to say is, what are those elements that someone who's hiring in a SciComms role looks like? Even within SciComms, there are different roles, by the way. There's a writing role, publications, etc. Then you have medical education, which is essentially slide decks and other aspects. Then you have medical events. Then you symposium, etc. And then you have digital. They are different. So it depends on which role you're applying for and they're hiring for. When it comes to core publications, for example, I think definitely, some things are quite standard. They will, of course, try and understand your scientific depth. They're not going to ask you every single thing you don't need to know. I mean, your field of research, your field of interest, do you know enough? Do you have the ability to interpret? If they give you a paper, will you be able to summarize it quickly? For example, if you're asked about, they will probably ask you scenario-based questions. Did you have a conflict? How do you manage conflict? How do you say manage negotiation? Some of these skills, because when you're writing, it's not just, and this is linked to, I think, your third or fourth question about how we approach the process. Because a publication writer or a SciComms is not just doing their work. Their work is about getting work done also from everybody else. When you're a writer, you're doing project management, you're doing time management, you're doing stakeholder management, everything, right? So how it works, and I link this question back to that, is when a clinical trial, I'm just thinking about a clinical trial, data readout is about to happen. So what we get is often it's either a study report, which is much later, which kind of gives you some explanation and all the data. Oftentimes in oncology, we don't have so much time. We actually start with the output tables. And then what we do is, you look at the protocol, you start already familiarizing yourself, because the decision to publish doesn't happen then when the data readout happens. My role is to plan this 3 years in advance. So I'm looking at all the studies that I'm going to read out. I'm looking at all the competitor activities. I'm looking at all the literature, identifying gaps, prioritizing all our publications, and then mapping it out. And then the writing team picks it up. And I used to be on that writing side, of course. So what they get as starting materials is protocols, any internal slide decks, and then the data set, analyze data. And then there are kickoff calls with the actual investigators who ran the trial. There are internal calls first with the medics who worked on the trial. The statistician is involved. So all of these folks, if it's biomarker data, biomarker team, PK, PKPD, all those teams are involved. They all come together, and then all of them build the outline. There are calls, multiple calls with those investigators who are running those trials. Interpretation. So it's easy. Nothing is easy, but yeah, you do the introduction, methods you have kind of there from the protocol. Results, if it's a primary paper, these are the endpoints. If it's a secondary or an exploratory, these are the endpoints. How do you write the discussion, right? That's the longest time that you're going to do. And that's where I think those discussions, and then there are multiple drafts going back and forth among all these, internally, externally, you know, and then finally, when everything is incorporated, then it gets submitted. So I think different folks, manage these, but the writing team, that's the process. So no one writes it by themselves. It's a joint effort, both is internal and external. And so, which means now you imagine time management is crucial. If you're submitting to a Congress, a lot of times we do simultaneous publication, right? So you have to plan your paper also in such a way that it get published around the time of a Congress. That gives a huge pass. And then you need to work with your PR team to say, can we do something on social media? You need to work with your field medical team, who are the liaisons who will discuss things with, these are medical folks, not the sales, who will discuss this data with the physicians. So they need to be trained and prepped. So all of this happens in parallel, which is my role. But then the writing team works on the pubs, other teams work on the med-ed. And then of course we have Congress presence and symposia and a whole lot of stuff. So that's how everything works hand in hand. Then commercial will need that information to train their folks separately, but that's a different story.
So hi Avishek, this is really great session. I had opportunity to attend your session during ISCR. So I have two questions. First is, don't you think that plain language summaries should be the norm, or all the scientific communication should be in plain language, layman's language? Because even native people find it difficult to understand those communications. Okay, so my first question is about.
I think it's a fair point. It's a fair point. I think it depends. One key thing or element of scientific communication is your target audience. So, some organizations have taken a stance that they're going to have plain language summaries for all their papers. But for certain organizations where the volume of publication or data evidence generation is so high, and if you already have 3 lakh papers published, and then you have 3 lakh plain language summaries published, it's a lot of information. And I think there is a need to fine tune how are these archived, where can these be searched, how to find these, how to standardize their format, readability. I think we will eventually get there, but I think at this point, it's slow and steady, I would say. And more importantly, to first check with the target audience, how frequently are they accessing this? How do they find these useful? So I think that the dialogue needs to happen. And then I think maybe we put more efforts into this.
Yeah. And a quick second question. This is about the role. I had opportunity to work on different kind of documents, like sometimes regulatory documents, sometimes communications. But I always get a comment like, you should not be hopping like a frog. You should be steady with one role, like do only communications or do only regulatory. So do you agree with that?
A lot of organizations have joint teams, so I don't know if I can comment and not create a controversy, but I think in our organization, we have separate teams. A lot of organizations, I know they keep it separate. I'll give you just one tidbit, and I'll take probably another question is, when I started off, sometimes I would get, not sometimes, actually I would get feedback all the time that this is reading like a mini report. And I think some organizations want to consciously avoid that by having different people writing study reports and writing publications. Because when you use a study report as a source and write a paper, I think it gets a little tricky not to get influenced by the style and format. So, but different ideologies, to be honest. And I mean, I have not done regulatory at all, and I'm quite okay with that.
Thank you so much.
So I would like to ask Raji to go with a rapid fire, because she has prepared some questions which you have to answer in like one word. So that will be something interesting. And people who have not got opportunity to ask questions, please connect with Avishek on LinkedIn. You can message him also.
Yeah, I mean, you can connect with me, and yes, after that you're going to mute me given the number of posts I do, but I'm happy to answer your questions there.
Yeah, I think Avishek will have to invite you again for just a question answer session also. There's a lot of questions in the chat box.
Anytime. Go ahead, Raji.
Yeah. So which 3 words best sums up you and your vision?
I think kindness, honesty, and passion.
If not in this profession, then where you would have been today?
It could possibly be in a legal profession, or it could be a journalist.
If you could talk to the president, what would you talk about?
I think making healthcare more accessible.
Your all-time favorite book?
All-time favorite, I think Emperor of Melodies, for the obvious reasons.
Who do you admire the most?
I think in my personal life, my father, definitely. But outside, I think there are quite a few people, especially I think people who have helped me without expecting any returns. I think I am really grateful. So I really admire them, and I want to pay it forward. That's the aim.
3 top things in your bucket list.
Doing my research, definitely number 1. I'm still preparing my proposal. Number 2 would be to return to India and do something in the academic field. I eventually might go back into teaching, doing something else, to create a bridge between academia and industry. And I think the third thing, probably not career related, it's more to probably help my son grow up into somebody who's like an ideal citizen.
What advice did you get that was the most rewarding kind of advice?
I think a few. I think the one thing which I think primarily, I think to really always take feedback. I mean, to be open to feedback, to be a good listener, and I think the last bit I mentioned about this conflict thing. Sometimes it's important to know your blind spots, and I think people who point it out to you are not always the villains. They're probably thinking the best for you.
Any decisions you are regret of in your life?
Actually, no, I don't. I was reading, I think there's a book that has come out which says you should regret your decisions because it helps you make better decisions in the future. But I think I'm okay.
Any hidden talent which most people are not aware of?
Unlike a lot of Bengalis, I'm not really great at stuff, but I do enjoy, I used to play a lot of basketball at the university level. So I think that's one thing I really enjoy.
The last question, 3 qualities a person must have to be successful, according to you?
Yeah, I think definitely I think somebody who's good at stakeholder management, somebody, and the better way to say it is somebody who's a little bit more, open to working with different people, somebody who enjoys writing and yet takes feedback on that writing, not very, strong about preferences. Somebody who's constantly trying to learn. The field is evolving every single day. And I think it's important to keep up. Otherwise, it's very difficult to survive in this field.
Thank you, Avishek. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully that was fast enough.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Avishek, for sharing your thoughts and giving us your time. I'm sure you'll be getting lots of questions and connection requests on your LinkedIn account. So we are already out of time. So please do join us next week in our next week mentorship session. We will be having with us Dr. Mohit Kumar Jolly, and he will be talking with us about what steps we can take to be happy and productive during our PhD. So please do join us next Tuesday. Thank you.
He is amazing. I got to know him during one of my talks with another group, and we have stayed in touch. I don't understand all the science he does, but he's a fabulous speaker and he's such a nice person. So I think you should come back and listen to him. Thank you so much for inviting me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I hope, Avishek, you will also join us for events that you enjoy.
Yes, of course. Anything you have where I can contribute to add value, definitely. Don't call me just because you said you would. Where you think I can add value, happy to.
Thank you. Thank you.
A network should last a lifetime. Let us help you create lasting professional relationships with our world-class mentors through the Biopatrika Industry Mentorship Program. A strategic guidance program unlike no other, full of expert interviews, industry internship opportunities, CV writing, inflection point analysis, life maps, and of course, the gateway to your dream career. For a limited time only, all our services are freely available for you as we truly want you to succeed.